So now I'm in the sleepy little town of Middleburg, Florida, south of Jacksonville. And in Middleburg, when you drive in, you'll see a couple of grocery stores, you'll see an Ace Hardware, a McDonald's. You know you've hit the big time when a McDonald's and a Wendy's is in your rural area. So they're here as well. But if you talk to the locals who live in these areas, it's remarkable how many of them love living here. In fact, those that are of working age are willing to travel the 30 to 60 minutes to go to work in the Jacksonville area where the bulk of the jobs are in this particular community. But what I wanted to talk to you about more than anything is why is it that people are wanting to move and buy in rural areas across our country? And that's really what we need to examine to help you to understand why there is a need and why there is a demand. So first of all, one of the segments of the population that is buying in rural areas is the baby boomer generation. Now, if you were to take a guess, how many million baby boomers are planning on retiring in the next 10 to 15 years? Well, it's about 80 million. And the USA Today, actually it was the National Association of Realtors commissioned a poll a couple of years back, and they asked these baby boomers where were they planning to move once they retired, because a lot of baby boomers, they have a lot of money available to them to retire on. And 60%, an overwhelming majority said that they would like to live in a rural area, in a small city, like a Middleburg, Florida. And so that was an exciting prospect, but that helped the National Association of Realtors understand where the path of progress is going to move around the nation. And so around the nation, people who are living in the Midwest are buying in Arkansas, but they're also buying in Florida, they're also buying in Texas, but they're also going to North Dakota to buy land. And so it's interesting. And so what is happening now is baby boomers wanting to retire. Let's focus on that thought for a moment. So if they're going to retire, what is the first step that they have to take? Well, they have to pick out an area like I've done today. But that first step is to buy that piece of land. And so baby boomers, they're not buying just a 1 acre tract or a 5 acre tract. We're seeing baby boomers becoming more commonplace where they're buying 50 acres, 20 acres, 100, 500 acres. In fact, I'm reminded of a story. I was at a wedding recently in Florida, and I was sitting next to a retiring Major General in the Army. And so we swapped occupations, and he was giddy when he learned that I was a land investor. And I said, well, why? He said, well, you know, I just bought 300 acres just 45 minutes north of Valdosta, Georgia. And I am so excited. It's always been my dream to live in a rural area. And he says, what my plans is I'm gonna live on 50 acres, and then eventually over time I'm going to subdivide those other areas in 50-acre tracts and sell those off. And that's how I can gain a portion of my retirement income. And so we're seeing more and more baby boomers considering buying land as an option, but also allowing it to grow as part of their investment portfolio at the same time. Now we're also seeing a second group that is emerging, and it's only been emerging in the last actually year or two. It's not something that's been emerging for quite some time, but we're seeing that actually investors who are nervous about having all their funds related or hinged to the stock market, what they're actually doing is they're actually taking a part of their investment portfolio and they're buying a piece of land with that. And again, they're buying a variety of shapes and sizes and types. So it's really kind of interesting how that's kind of evolving like that, where we're seeing more just investors doing straight up investments for parcels of land. Again, whether it's an acre, whether it's 500 acres, whether it's 1,000 acres. And so it's interesting to kind of see that dynamic come into play. But also, we're finding the large institutional investors are also coming in and buying large tracts of land, specifically in timberland and farmland arenas. And so we're seeing a variety of different types of purchases kind of across the board. And so also too, let's take a moment and let's look at the different types of land that are available to be purchased around the country. And the first one is developing land. And now, typically when we think of land, we think of land for development. And oddly enough, in this economy, that is a type of land that is really not in demand at the moment. There is too many large land tracts available to be bought for development, but there's really not a lot of building going on at the moment. So that area is not really prevalent, and it's not an area that I pursue at the moment as well. I would have done that 5 years ago, 3 years ago, but right now in this economy, that's not practical. Now, the other type of land that is in demand, and also a segment in our economy, is what I call the small parcel vacant land. And this is usually a parcel of land that's 20 acres or less. And this is kind of what people will think about as a hobby farm or a rural homestead, or a kind of a vacation destination home site. But again, people are buying the piece of land. And here's interesting bit of information. About 60 to 70% of people that will buy land today will never live on that land. They will never move on it. So it's really about investing at this point, but it's also about hopes and dreams. And so the hope and I feel what I do is I'm a supplier of hopes and dreams, which is really quite remarkable that I can be to be of help to those people. So let's go back. People are buying developing land, which is not very prevalent right now, but that's an option. Small parcel vacant land. And now there's also the income producing land. And this is again the farmland or timberland that I mentioned that the larger institutional investors, the private equity funds and so forth, are buying. But there's also smaller investors that maybe have $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 are buying smaller tracts of farmland as well. So we're starting to see that area also emerging with some great opportunities, because that is income producing land, farmland. And then the fourth segment is raw land, where it's just straight up, it's just a straight up piece of land. It has no improvements on it. It has no, it has a connecting road to it. May not even have a fence line around it, but it's a larger tract of land. Like I referenced the Army general, where he was the major general, where he had bought a parcel of land, the larger piece of raw land. Again, that is something that is becoming more in vogue and more in demand. So what we're seeing then is not only are we seeing a number of different types of investors or people groups buying land. In fact, there's a lot of documentation now that I've been reading where even the 20-somethings are buying parcels of land who live in the big city, and they're also starting to step forward and look ahead to their future. But really what it comes down to is people are nervous about having all their money in the stock market. They're looking at gold as one option, but land is starting to emerge a little bit more. And so in our next segment, I'll be talking a little bit about sellers and why are there really sellers out there that are willing to sell their property for 20 to 50 cents on the dollar, and how you can be a part of that. So let's continue on as we roll ahead and we learn more about land investing. Soon we'll be showing you some of those parcels of land that you can be a part of.